Okay, we are on the air. We're going to go ahead and start, even though the council president is going to join us a little bit later, and we have Councilor Massey online, but we'll get started with our work session and our new city engineer, Jennifer Garbely.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I'm excited. We've got a lot of projects, so let's get started. So, here's a Monroe Greenway. I'd like to remind you we've kind of divided this up into 3 segments. Our East Monroe Greenway is our piece that goes from 37th to Linwood. And we have hired Consor. And now we're in the waiting game of ODOT getting all of their information and getting Consor contracted. So as soon as they're contracted, they will get started on design. We're anticipating that kind of late October or November at this time frame. But pretty excited to finally start design on that piece of the project.
And will there be public
Absolutely.
engagement pieces during
Yes.
that? Because I definitely think there are questions out there.
There is going to be plenty of opportunity for them to get involved. I think we've got at least 2 open houses and then a 3rd even planned.
Okay.
More probably closer to construction, but yeah,
Great. Okay.
definitely there's a good chunk of money to spend on public engagement, which is exciting.
Good. And I will say to everyone, I mean, we've had a practice of trying to hold our questions to the end, but with a presentation like Jennifer's going to give, where we're going project to project, I think you should just speak up with your questions as we go, rather than try to circle us back. So you can go on to your other segments of Monroe.
Yeah, next you have Central Monroe Greenway. So that's our section that's basically on either side of 224, and then also connecting up to the 7 acres apartments section there. So that piece, the IGA is still in ODOT's hands. That's what we're waiting on right now. But that's for the $1.5 million. That's state funds that we get to manage. However, we do have some URA funds that's going to be used for this section as well. So with those funds, I am actually going to get started with a contract to start looking at what we're going to need for a railroad crossing order, because we got to cross the railroad at Oak Street. So that piece we know is going to take a little bit of time to get through that process, so we're going to get that started right now. We're going to direct appoint 3J Consulting firm to help us. And then we have our West Monroe Greenway, and just want to remind you that that currently is unfunded, and that's everything on the other side of 224 to 99E. So that'll be the next section that we'll be looking for funding as we get closer to wrapping up the other 2 segments. That's the program.
So at the 224 intersection, ODOT's doing that? The city's not doing that?
We are part of the design team,
Uh-huh.
but we are not in charge of it.
Okay.
So at 224, they're redoing the signal, and then they're also tied it in with a paving project that's going up a full distance. Is it Harrison? I think it's Harrison all the way to Rusk Road.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know if you saw it, but we recently saw some coverage that YMCA daycare has been closed, I think, since COVID, or maybe even before. And there's a movement afoot to try and get funding to reopen it. So just wanted to make sure you knew that could start being utilized again.
It would be great. It's been empty definitely for a long time. The changes that we do have making at that intersection is it is a right in, right out. So that's what we're still proposing on both sides. No through traffic on Monroe. It would be only pedestrian and bikes. So there is a median being proposed to be installed in the middle of that intersection, which will make a very safe crossing in that area.
Anybody have questions on Monroe?
Yeah, just on the funding, because it said that the fund should cover if the funds end up being short for whatever reason. Because I'm assuming that it's not going to start till 25, 26, right? So if for any reason, is there a contingency if we're short funds at all for these projects?
I mean, we'll have to relook and see what that is. As far as from 37th to Linwood, we're working really hard to stay within the right-of-way to keep that budget as close as possible. The hard part with that project is it's federal dollars. And so federal dollars means you have extra items you have to do in order to have a federal
Right.
project. So being cautious of that, like the design works even more than I anticipated that we would normally have in our own projects because they just have more requirements that we have to meet. So I won't know more until we actually get to design and kind of see how much, what's impacting that.
Okay.
I do feel like Central's got a pretty nice budget because it has URA dollars and it has the ODOT state funds that we're getting, the 1.5 million. So I feel like that's got a good chance of actually making it, but those funds have to stay in Central. We
Right.
can't transfer them because they are subject to location. So that's the hard part. Like, I can't just be like, oh, I've saved money here, so I can spend it elsewhere.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
thank you.
I'm wondering about the URA funds that are used for Central, if you know roughly how much that is, and if it'll go, like, what will the contracting entail for the crossing work?
So it's not just the railroad, that's just the first piece of it. It's the whole connection from 224 all the way to 7 Acres Apartments. And then we're also going to use that money to help with the connection on the other side on 37th. So we'll be looking at, so there'll actually be 2 rail orders to make sure we can get bikes and pedestrians through on both sides, on 37th and on Oak Street.
Okay,
I don't remember the exact dollar amount for the URA,
that's okay.
but
And with the rail order, how do we usually proceed with that? We have to work with Union Pacific?
Yes.
And that can be a lengthy process.
yes.
So I'm wondering how that works with the timing of the project.
Well, that's why we're starting now. So I can't really start our connection pieces on 220 because the 224 isn't completely designed yet. So I'm starting the rail order pieces now to hopefully by the time I can start actually working on the design piece of the other portion of the project, we would then be able to mesh this together and not lose any time.
Okay, great.
So that's
you.
why the rail order is kind of like, we gotta start these now because they do take some time to get through.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, we are delayed on 224 because they're not even gonna be done with design for probably another year. So, yeah.
More questions on Monroe Greenway? Okay.
Counselor, it's 1.3 million from the URA. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, my favorite project, Meek North Phase. Here we go. So, our stormwater pipeline and water line easements are all in place. So we are getting very close. Our contractor is Tapany. They have an executed contract. It's looking like they're gonna start late this fall. Could be as early as October, November, especially on the pipelines. The only piece we're still struggling with is that closing on the Belfour property. So it's getting closer, but it's a lot to coordinate between Clackamas County, the railroad, and ourselves, but we are getting close. So I'm hoping that closes within the next month, and then we're gun-free to move forward and build as fast as we can. That's a map of the picture, just in case if you needed to remember what we're doing. We've completed the south phase, and we have the north phase that starts just north of the Murphy property, and it goes up past the hillside. Then you have your the pond, which is at the Belfour Detention Facility. That's the piece of property we're purchasing. And then we have a pipeline that goes from the rest of the way all the way up to the Roswell Detention Facility. We have a water crossing in there too. The pipeline comes very close. The water line is pretty old, so Water was happy that we are replacing that line. It doesn't have, there's not too many water connections to our industrial side over there, and so they're happy that that is getting replaced as it's approaching like 75 years old.
And that water line is serving both directions, residential and industrial?
It is, as far as that goes, but it dead ends towards the industrial in a sense. And so we're being really cautious when we actually do the construction. We're only going to be able to pull that offline probably at night. So we're not, and it can't be summer just construction because of the demand those industrial facilities need.
And the north phase, south phase, is that line actually where the flow goes the two different ways? No.
Nope, it was just how we phased the project.
Okay.
So that's the end of the south phase and the beginning of the north phase, basically. However, we'll probably build it from majority from it from Roswell Detention Facility towards the pond. You want to be downstream and build upward. But that's the scope of the work. Is the north phase is going to be above there.
Questions? Okay.
Washington area improvements. So tonight you're gonna get an award approval. We did our best value process. Through that process, we selected Landis and Landis Construction. We got 6 proposals. Was very pleased with all 6 proposals as far as who proposed. It was the low bid that received the most points. The engineer's estimate was over 8 million, and we got a bid just over 7 million. So the process still worked. We still got a really competitive bid, and it was nice to be able to kind of qualify the contractors. And so I was really pleased with that process, how it went. They want to start in October.
And that's how long a construction?
It'll be at least a year. It'll depend on our culvert crossing that needs to happen. It can only be done in the summer months. So I'm hoping everything goes fine. I was trying to give them 2 summers, so right now they do have a contract that could go, but they're ready to get started, and any contractor that wants to get in, they also want to get out as quickly as possible. So I'm hoping by next fall, we're actually kind of butting up, but it'll depend on if that culvert crossing can be done next summer.
Great. Questions? Okay.
All right, here we go. Ardenwald North. Here's a cross-section of what we are kind of planning to do. There is 2 mountable curbs going on each side of the roadway. This mountable curb is there for 2 reasons. One is drainage. This area has actually really poor drainage, as you can see in some of the pictures, to actually pull the water and get it into our actually stormwater infrastructure system. The second reason is actually for any people with impaired, so they can follow the curb and know where they're at along the roadway. This is a shared road concept. There is no tactile dividing the walking space at all. This is a true shared space. So bikes, pedestrians, and cars can be on the roadway. So the curb to curb is about 22 feet, is what you're looking for. That's going to take the space down this area.
And so, I mean, we're all used to seeing the bike sharrows like you've got drawn there. Do we actually put pedestrian sharrows as well?
I'm not sure if she's putting markings as well.
Yeah.
I'll have to ask if Tessie's going to add that. I don't remember.
Or
recall.
do you put signage that says, you know?
Signage, definitely. Share road. Yeah.
Yeah.
Signage for sure. Questions?
It's good to see the cross-section. Yeah.
No? Okay. We're preparing the bid documents now. As soon as Washington area improvements, I think, kicks off a little bit further down, we'll be able to get this one out the door. I believe we're gonna just go low bid on this one. It's a little bit smaller project, and we're gonna just see how that pans out.
Does it have a lot of utility?
It does have some wastewater and water work that is happening on some of the streets. Some projects that haven't been picked up in the past are now being pulled in on this project. And a couple other streets are getting grinded and inlaid through with this project that are in the area that, are just kind of in poor condition. Okay, King Road improvements. They are moving along. This is in design. Kittleson is doing our design for us. Really strong transportation group. They do a lot of national transportation work, and they do a lot of guidelines for our nation. So I just really want to iterate that because they are really looking at this corridor from start to finish, 43rd all the way to Linwood, and making sure we're going to have safe crossings the entire way. They've completed their survey. They're approaching 30% design. And at the moment, we're looking at doing an open house in early November. That would be in the process between the 30 and 60% design submittal. We've gotten a lot of feedback from the community as far as, hey, we want to comment on this. We want we want to make sure be able to have feedback before the 60%. So this is our way of doing that. We're excited. Every crossing is going to get enhanced as far as that goes from what you see today. You're also changing how the road's going to feel by pulling in those curbs and putting up those bike lanes on the multi-use paths. So the road's going to feel a little bit narrower, which I hope is going to help slow traffic down a little bit. And help those crossings feel not as long because it is shorter, and also narrowing it, hopefully it slows down a little bit.
No questions?
I'm wondering how it's being coordinated with the Llewellyn Neighborhood Association and their transportation work. I know that King Road had come up in some of the survey work there, and so I'm hoping that the other group is coordinated with you.
Yes, they've taken in their report and they've had identified items that need to be worked out on King Road. I would say the one thing that there's been a lot of pushback on is everyone feels there should be an RFB at Stanley and King.
Is that too close to Wichita?
Yep, it's too close to Wichita and it's also too close to home. So right now, we're leaving Wichita in because that's an in-place at a facility that we want people to get to. And then home has been identified as another location for an RFB that we do plan on putting in. Now, Stanley is going to get a huge enhancement. With that jog in there, we do need to make some changes and some safety considerations at that location. So it's not being left behind. It will get some major improvements. It just might not have an RFB because it may not be appropriate for that space.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with the crossing at Wichita, that comes under the school district. Are they in federal guidelines for proximity then? Or like to have another flashing beacon? I think we'd have to make the decision about moving Wichita, and that doesn't make sense
at all
Okay.
at this point. We will see. At 30%, I'll know a little bit more about what the designers are thinking and what they recommend. And then we'll have an opportunity to give feedback at our open house.
Okay.
I'll just say that, I'm a fan of what happened on Linwood. I'm a fan of, both the paths and the narrowing down and slowing people down. But I will note that I've been hearing from a couple of people on Johnson Creek Boulevard about traffic concerns, and I guess I wonder if we start slowing people down here, will we push more traffic to Johnson Creek Boulevard? And I just, I don't expect you to have an answer for that, but just wanted to bring that up because I do, hear complaints about trying to get out of driveways at rush hour on Johnson Creek Boulevard and things like that.
Johnson Creek's definitely another animal as far as that goes, and it's got some concerns that need to be addressed at some point. The harder part is that's Portland, a lot of it, right? We have a little piece of it, but then it's Portland or then it's county. So
Yeah.
we'll have to tackle that one at another date.
I wish there's some way we could, force everybody to use 224, but people are wanting to use other ways to get toward,
Yeah.
Portland. So anyway, just wanted to bring that up.
Any other questions? All right, Harvey Street improvements. So we selected Century West as our design consultant. They are currently getting some additional survey to start the work, and they should have that done by the end of this month, which is exciting. Remember, on this project, we actually started it as an in-house job and then did a survey, went out to the community, and asked them, hey, do we want sidewalks on both sides of the street, or do we want sidewalk on one side of the street and maintain parking on one side of the street? And that was their main objective. They wanted sidewalk on one side, and they wanted to still have parking on one side of the street. So at this point, we have not decided what side of the street we're designing on yet. As you can see, this was a picture from our consultant's proposal. We've got a lot of utilities underneath this roadway, and so we really have to consider where we're putting our infrastructure. And personally, I don't love putting infrastructure sidewalk over water lines. Like, that's not a big benefit to us, because then we don't have access to them very easily. So we haven't decided yet. That'll be happening within the next couple months. We'll know what side of the sidewalk. We'll do another open house, and we will let the community know what side we decided and where the parking's going to be.
As I recall, Harvey has kind of a patchwork of existing sidewalks, some on both sides. So whatever side you pick, will you actually remove the sidewalk that exists on the other side, or will you leave whatever exists in place?
I think that depends on where the roadway is and what side it is. If I can leave infrastructure and that makes sense, then I will. If it becomes a problem, then it'll have to be removed.
Questions?
All right. So we got our wastewater system improvements project done this year. That involved open trench, lining, and the upgrade to the food cart station so they could be brought into code. Something I just want to mention is this was under engineer's estimate also. So we're doing a good job of estimating, and we're getting good bids. So I think that's a really positive thing that's happening. That's not happening in all of Clackamas County. So we are getting good bids, and we got contractors that want to work for us. So I think that's a really positive thing for our city. It is completed. We had one street on Kent that did need some extra pavement, super old. As they were opening up the trench, it kept collapsing, so they had to make it wider, and then the roadway was kind of really deteriorating. So we put in a wider patch than what was typical, but otherwise on budget, on schedule, and they did a fantastic job, McDonald. All right, here's our first grind and inlay for the season. We had a little rough start yesterday, just as a heads up. A PGE pole was hit. The team did fantastic. Our inspector was out on site. They called the project manager. Hector made it out there as well with Ben, and they stayed on site until PGE got there. This happened late in the day. It was probably about 4:30, but we were able to get PGE out on there by 6 o'clock. So fantastic. What I do know is no one got hurt. Everything's fine. Not great for the contractor, but I hope today went better. I didn't hear any new complaints as far as today. Here's all the streets that we are doing a grind and inlay for. So this is supposed to be finished up this week. We'll see if they make it this week. It may go into next week a little bit, as yesterday was a little behind schedule than was expected.
Wait, they do all of this in a week?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Wow.
That's their schedule at the moment. I think it might take them a couple extra days, a little longer than they anticipated. So yeah, you're grinding off basically 2 inches and then putting back 2 inches of asphalt. And then you come back a couple of weeks later and do all the striping or markings, put back the stop bars, things like that, all the thermoplastic.
Wow.
Also, this project was under engineer's estimate. So another one we're getting a great bid on. We thought we'd be closer to $500,000, and it was just over, just under 400,000. So we can do more, which is exciting.
Can you tell us how many miles or parts?
I believe it's about 1.5 miles with all of these segments put together.
Okay, and then how many miles were the
Slurry seal?
Yeah.
We did about 6 miles, I believe, of slurry seal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so over 7 miles of Milwaukie roads got repaved this year.
Yes.
Nice.
Which is exciting.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, so
exciting.
this should be finished up within the next week or so. And we're starting to prepare for actually the next one for next year, which is exciting. So. All right, I don't know if you know a whole lot about what's going on at 42nd and King. So we actually have an illegal turn on 42nd and King. On 42nd, if you were to turn left onto King, there's no actually stop sign there. And you can't actually tell that there's a sign up. It doesn't look, sometimes some people thinks it's a stop sign from King turning onto 42nd. So it's illegal. I've known about it since I've started, and now I'm going to do something about it. So we're going to do a temporary build at first. I want to see how it impacts the traffic patterns of this area because it is going to push traffic in a little bit different direction. But basically we're looking at putting a tough curb, which is the same thing we did on Linwood for the temporary diverter. It's a curb that has delineators in the center. You can see it there on your left, a picture of it. That's going to go for about mid-block through the intersection. So now when you're traveling on 42nd to King, you could only make a right. The other part this will affect is on King Road. If you're approaching 42nd eastbound, you can only also make a right. You won't be able to go through the intersection.
You can make a left, you mean?
No, you can't
Oh,
make...
you're talking about from the lower
Yes.
numbered streets. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Onto the arterial, you could only make a right. On King Road, traveling westbound, you can take 42nd or you can still go straight. Does that make sense?
So, going eastbound on King,
Yeah,
where the only stop sign is now, you're only gonna be able to turn right there?
yes. Yes, that is probably the biggest concern at the moment. As I know there is some people that utilize that, but it's also very dangerous. I can't tell you how many times that's my way home. I've almost been hit because they can't get across that intersection.
That's the route I take too. I was, every time I drive by, I'm just curious why they didn't just make it a 3-way stop.
Well, the most of the traffic does travel on the arterial, so on King Road, 242nd to Harrison, right? That is the actual arterial path. So we're gonna look at how that affects the traffic patterns before we do a final design. The final design will be in the project for the Locust, 40th, and 42nd project.
So this isn't set in stone?
It is a temporary, we're installing it basically to see how it affects the area and to bring it up to code, right?
So it's interesting that you say it's illegal because it was done when that Safeway was built, which wasn't that long ago. You know, I mean, that light was put in at 43rd, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I
It's
guess
the-
it's been 15 years probably.
Yeah, it's the left turn on 42nd to King. That's the illegal part that creates the biggest danger at the moment.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, maybe I'm not understanding. Can you explain again why we wouldn't add stop signs? Why would we change the whole pattern?
Because it's an arterial street.
Right.
So, I mean, it is a possibility we can look at in the future. It doesn't necessarily, you put in a stop sign, you're going to stop the flow of King Road through there. So it's going to greatly impact how it actually flows. And the other piece of this is we are looking at Harrison and 42nd as well. So we are doing an evaluation of what needs to happen there. As Monroe Greenway goes in, we have knowledge that, you know, you're pushing more traffic off of Monroe Greenway to create an actual greenway. So when you divert that onto Harrison, that intersection fails. So you've got both intersections that we're looking at the same time. This one, we're putting in a temporary to see how that changes the pattern of the traffic flow in there. But something's going to happen also at 42nd and Harrison. So we're looking at roundabouts, we're looking at signals. I don't have an answer at the moment, but the piece of the pie is also there's both intersections we're going to have to look at. It's not just one. And how you move traffic through that area.
At least 42nd and Harrison, you can stop. It's a four-way stop on 42nd and Harrison.
But it's going to fail, right? So as we move into the future, that intersection fails because it's not moving traffic fast enough
Right.
through it. So something new is going to happen there.
Right.
Yeah.
Isn't also part of it the fact that having
Yeah, you should come up and
43rd
talk
I'll
on
just-
it.
It's a nice new table. Yeah, I was gonna say it's good questions. As I understand it, and Jen you can tell me if I'm wrong, but part of it is also the distance between the stop light at 43rd and creating another stop,
Stops.
and then also on Harrison.
Correct.
From Harrison and 42nd as well.
Yeah.
So there's also that site distance or that distance requirement.
Requirement.
Is that true?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Good job.
Did you have other questions?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you for prioritizing this. It's definitely an intersection that needed a lot of TLC. So thank you. I also travel that area, and I think having the additional backup on 42nd or on King, going along 40, what would that be? 41st, basically in these directions past the Safeway, I think would be even more problematic for folks. But I guess, so what I'm wondering is, I imagine that there will be some folks that turn a little earlier around that corner, and I'm kind of spacing on the numbers of the streets, but to be able to get, to be able to either turn left or
Welland.
to bypass things. And those streets are in pretty poor condition, so I'm wondering what sort of plans are in place after this change rolls out to maybe put those streets and their their surfaces in the queue.
So I've got a current traffic count for what's existing.
Okay.
And then we're going to do a new traffic count and pattern to see how it's affecting and if they are turning early on like Llewellyn and see if we need to add that to the project to have an enhancement.
Okay.
So definitely considering it. Haven't moved forward with anything yet because I don't have any data to support it.
Okay.
Because it's not in the works at the moment. But if we create an issue, then we should look at how are we going to adapt and make it better.
And the current traffic count isn't enough to necessitate improvements on those streets?
No, not necessarily. I mean, it's what is it going to change? Like, how is it going to change? You know, is it going to put more traffic on those other streets than what it is now? Or is it just people are moving in a different direction?
Okay.
So, don't get me wrong, they are in poor condition and they do need help. And so we're going to have to figure that out at some point anyways. But I might have to do it sooner rather than later by making changes with this pattern.
Okay.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
maybe we probably need to have at some point a general pavement condition discussion because so many people on council are new.
Yeah.
Because really, the SSMP, you don't prioritize necessarily by traffic count, you prioritize by pavement.
Or, well, by arterial actually in Collector, and that's a neighborhood road.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, I mean, we've already kind of we're moving in the direction, right, with the grinded inlay project that, no, we need to focus on our residential streets as well.
Yeah.
But yes, I would agree.
But we don't have a, yeah.
We need something more informal that says, hey, we need to change what we're doing
Yeah.
and document it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Agreed.
I will just say, it's an interesting sort of trade-off about better pavement, but also inviting more diversion, right? Inviting more people to use the other streets if you make them better. I have had a conversation with someone who lives actually two different people who live on the what I call Lower King Road, like the 36th, 37th in there, where it's actually quite terrible, but they don't necessarily want it repaved because they already have so much cut-through traffic going, especially they attribute to the hospital, like they think it's around shift changes at the hospital, that they don't want more people coming through there and going at faster speeds. So it's an interesting, trade-off about pavement condition.
I see what you're saying. I'm also kind of worried about left-hand turns and visibility if they go down to the next arterial to be able to turn. It's kind of a tricky space.
Yep. Yep.
I also just wanted to call out we're 10 minutes over. Thanks.
All right, here's my last slide. Waverly Heights sewer improvements, we selected Stantec. They just now got their contract in place, so that is gonna start moving. Remember, on that project, we also get West funds. They're supporting 33% of the design work, and hopefully we'll get 33% also for the construction. Waverly South Improvements is a smaller project. It's an in-house, but we're getting ready to kick it off. It is by Lava Drive. There's some water, wastewater, and then a little bit of sidewalk and ADA ramps with some pavement upgrades, but being done in-house. Then we got their Logos 40th and 42nd. I'm anticipating an RFQ going out this winter.
For design.
For design. Yeah, I want a little bit more of that study done to understand those two intersections a little bit more. And then we'll reach out and kind of know which direction we're kind of hopefully going in to bring on a consultant and do the actual design. The important one I really want to talk about though today is water service RFQ. I don't know if Peter's had an opportunity to talk to you a little bit about it, but we've got a lot of work coming up. We redid the water master plan, and a big part of this is we haven't touched our treatment plants in over 30 years. They've been put, Band-Aid after Band-Aid put on them, but they haven't had any upgrades in 30 years. We are also shy of a reservoir. We lack actual storage. In the previous water master plan, they said it was fine. They used 1 day of storage. I'm sorry, that's not acceptable to me or Peter, the public works director. So when we looked at this new water master plan, we said, no, it's 3 days. We need 3 days of storage. So it means we are shy of a reservoir. But it means that the previous water master plan didn't indicate that we need a reservoir. At the moment, we are shy of that reservoir. So we still need to figure out where are we going to put it? What zone should we actually be putting it in? So we've got a bunch of studies and we got a bunch of design work that needs to happen. So me and Peter put together this RFQ. I'm going to manage the RFQ. And we want to bring on 2 consultants, if possible. We'll see what kind of proposals we get. It is due Thursday, so I'll know a little bit more after that. But basically, I want to run them like an on-call. 2 on-calls, basically 1 for each consultant. One will probably focus more on the treatment plants, and one would focus more on the reservoir. What I'm trying to do is figure out what actually needs to happen at both of these facilities, get a design together, and then figure out how can we get funding for it. So the plan is to look at, I'm hoping if you are in agreement, we can do 2 on-calls. Each of them are $3 million each. It would be a 5-year contract. So it'd be looking at it over for the next 5 years, working on studies, working on designs, to work on, we have a well that hasn't been in operation for a long time. This summer, I know several times the water operators were in trying to fix wells that were having issues. We need to get well 8 online. That needs to be a priority. We can't wait any longer. Water is important. So, questions, concerns?
So what was, that total is 6 million?
6
And
million.
that's over 5 years, or is that per year?
No, 5 years.
Okay, all right.
No, that is total.
Total, okay.
Total over 5 years.
Just wanted to make sure.
And that's,
That will lead us to a plan for a new reservoir.
new reservoir,
be a lot
treatment
more.
plant upgrades, well upgrades. Not only does well 8 need to be addressed, 4 and 5, I mean, 2 we're working on right now, but 4 and 5 haven't been touched. 6 probably needs a few little love.
So do we need to update the water master plan then?
It just was updated.
That's what I thought, but with
Yeah.
this new information, should we then
Mm-hmm.
amend it to include the 3 days of, because right now it says 1 day.
It is already
right?
in
Oh,
there.
it's already been,
It's
okay.
already in there. Yep, nope, it's already in there, so it shows that we need a reservoir. The data says, hey, originally they're like, you need a reservoir now, and I'm like, I can't build a reservoir now. Like, I need funding, I need a spot, I need a location. So the plan is to build it in the next 5 to 8 years. That's what I'm getting ready for. That's what I'm preparing for. Is with bringing this consulting firms on, let us know what makes most sense, where can we, stretch our dollars the most, and then also bring our infrastructure up to standard.
And does all of that change going forward with the rehab of the Stanley Reservoir?
Nope,
No.
that still needs to happen.
And is that this winter?
Uh-huh.
When is that?
Yeah.
That's this winter.
Yep. That's gonna happen, actually this kind of fall, winter, so it should be actually starting pretty soon. I didn't get an update from Peter on it as he's managing that one. But nope, that's already in the works and that needs to happen, as far as that goes. Same thing with SCADA. SCADA still happens. It is still moving forward. None of that changes. So, am I gonna have is there any concerns from you all, if I bring this to you? Because, I understand, $6 million is a lot of money, but it is over 5 years. And if we don't use it, it doesn't, we're not paying that out, right? Like, it's an on-call. If we decide, nope, this isn't what we want to do, you're done, you walk away. So it's not a guarantee of $6 million that's going out the door. It's there if we need it to get the design and do construction possibly, if we need their support during those
Right.
process.
Well, I certainly agree we need more than 1 day of storage, so it makes sense to me.
We need one more day storage, especially with how many fires are starting to happen and things like that. Like we're really lacking fire support by not having more storage.
Questions, comments? Counselor Massey has his hand up. Sorry, you may have had that up for a while. I hadn't looked up
Sure.
at him.
It hadn't been that long.
Okay.
Thanks for the presentation. My question is really along the day storage. Where did 3 days come from? I would expect that there would be a public works or emergency standards somewhere. So
Yeah. 3 days is more on the standard side of having storage. 1 day is
Well,
not.
Yeah,
I don't know where 1 day
understand
came from.
1 day, but I'm just asking, is 3 days enough?
Yes.
Where does the guidance come from?
So if you don't have enough turnover, your water could actually go bad. So 3 days is actually kind of a state standard as far as that goes. It's what I've designed for the last 20 years, is 3
Okay.
days. So
In other words, if you start to getting into too much storage, you have, a stale issue.
yes, you're gonna have water quality issues. So for sure,
Okay.
you do wanna turn
Okay,
your
fair.
reservoir over. But 1 day is, you're turning it over really fast.
Okay.
And
Got
if
it.
you have And I guess a bigger issue is if you have a well go out, then you can't refill those reservoirs quick enough.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
I guess the sort of buried question is, does doing this change is doing this likely to change our rate, what we have projected as rate increases going next year? And
I don't think it changes. This is work that's actually built into the CIP. This is all stuff that needs to happen. The reservoir siting stuff didn't make it into this last CIP, but it will need to make it into the CIP. What the hard question there is, I don't have enough money to build all of this. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how much it's going to cost to build it, and then figure out how we're going to fund the actual construction side of these capital. Like, we don't have enough money at the moment for a reservoir, for sure, absolutely. So as far as this part of it, yes, we're good covered with doing the design. I'm hoping I can then utilize these findings to go out for money and get grants, because I'm going to have a ready project to go. So that's my goal, is to have stuff shelf ready, so when things are available, we can snag it and get it. But it may have to be a choice of, we may need debt to actually build it. And that's a whole nother conversation at a later date.
right. Any further questions or comments? Okay.
Okay.
So, sorry, so the
Go ahead.
project itself wouldn't necessarily constitute an increase of fees, but possibly funding it would.
Yeah, we do not have enough funding to probably, for the entire, all the treatment plant work that needs to happen, and all the reservoir, a brand-new reservoir, with the current funding structure that we have. So, just to be very clear upfront about that, yes, we will need some way to find funding.
And there have been state grants, and there have been,
Yeah.
out of the federal infrastructure bill and stuff, there have been actually a lot of communities getting funding for this kind of work the last
Yeah.
year or two. Whether that money will be flowing as freely, 3 years from now is another question, but at least there's some potential out there for.
The loans are also a little better. We can get sometimes 1 or 2% loans through the utility revolving water fund sources. So there is better options sometimes than for transportation. But what I am seeing is there is quite a bit of stuff that's coming out that we might be able to get grants for. But if we don't have a shelf-ready project, we can't compete.
Right.
So,
I hope we
And
can
we-
get it funded that route.
yeah, and we may have to, pick which project we do first and do that slower if we can't get the funding we needed.
Right. Thank you.
I think we're now 20 minutes over.
All right, the only other thing I got is the Public Works Standards update is going to be coming your way. We're going to be doing an update to the Public Works Standards, and that I'll be bringing those updates December this year, and then we're going to come for approval in January.
Great.
Any other questions?
Questions, anyone?
Just a comment. Best promotion ever.
I would agree. Thank you for that. She's
you.
amazing.
Nice work.
All right.
Thank you, Jennifer. And then we have.
And Mayor,
the
while
agenda.
we're moving people around, I just wanted to bring up an issue for tonight. Our primary spokesperson this evening on 3 of our agenda items is very ill and will not be here.
Oh,
We believe that we can easily cover. Brett will be here, and the DLC is actually a vote, not a conversation. So both of those pieces can happen. Joseph and I can be here tonight to try and do the policy work plan discussion for planning, but I just want to call out that we would be trying to represent that plan without being the staff of that plan. So it's up to you what y'all want to do.
we can sort that out at the beginning of the next, or at the break or something.
We can. I would like to, I have an odd feeling that my very not okay employee will try to show up here. And
Oh.
if we're not going to continue that conversation, I would like to let her go. If we are going to, she'll probably call in.
No, she needs to rest.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay. So You'll be here with Brett, and we'll do those two, and then we'll punt on the other. You'll let her know. Thank you.
I mean, I guess I still feel like we should punt the DLC till after we finish that conversation.
And I'm going to defer that to you all. Seriously, that's a call. She doesn't need to be here for either case for that, because it's either a vote or it's a punt. So I'll defer to you all to make that decision on the dice.
Quick question, City Manager. Do we have access to some of these PowerPoints that staff presents us with? It'd be great to.
Yes. Would you like access?
I would
We
love
put them in the
access.
packet, so you can actually pull them with the
the
minutes. I
fact.
believe.
After
Yeah.
the meetings, they're up.
Oh, okay. Because I tried to
But we
find
can
some
also
of them,
email
but
them to
I
you
was
if you'd
looking in
like
the
them.
wrong space. So okay.
The day
That'd
after
be
the
awesome.
meetings, they're posted on the meeting page, so.
Okay. Cool.
Where the
Good to
packets
know.
are.
Thank you.
All right, we have Toby LaFrance and not Peter to talk about the CUAB.
We have multiple people who will not be joining us this evening for multiple reasons like that.
Okay.
Yes. So, good afternoon, Toby LaFrance, Finance Director, and as duly noted, I was scheduled to be here with Peter, our Public Works Director, so I'll do the best I can to cover the subject that we're discussing right now, which is proposed changes to the Citizens Utility Advisory Board, and the proposed change is to make it a subcommittee of the Budget Committee. So a little bit of background, the CUAB, Citizens Utility Advisory Board, is something that has been closely tied with Public Works and has played a key role in essentially reviewing utility, the capital improvement plan, system plans, and then the rates and the funding associated with those utilities, and advising council on those matters. Of late, there's been some difficulties finding enough volunteers to appoint to this CUAB, and the idea that's going to be before you this evening came about twofold. With the Budget Committee, there is a full slate of volunteer residents on the Budget Committee, and there's a lot of crossover between what the CUAB does and what the Budget Committee does. So with that background, what I'd like to do is kind of cover a little bit about the purpose of the CUAB, how there's this crossover, and the staff recommendation. So with that, in the municipal code, it outlines what the CUAB is going to do. It outlines its purpose, and its purpose involves a couple of key things, and this is where there's a lot of overlap with our Budget Committee. One of the key things is to review the city's capital improvement program as it applies to our utilities, water, stormwater, and sewers. And in order to be able to do the capital improvement program, you need to know where those projects come from, what's the genesis of that. And so we've expanded beyond what says in code, which is just the CIP, to include the system plans. One of the things you were just talking about a few minutes ago. So that's one of the key items. Another key item is to advise council on rates. And in order to understand rates, we also need to understand the full funding of our utilities. And one of the other key funding pieces is our system development charges. So the CUAB has also been advising staff and council on the system development charges. Additionally, as part of the budget process, is the role of the CUAB to review and advise on community and staff proposals for Wes's Good Neighbor or our Kellogg funds. So these are all things very closely tied to budget and where there is a lot of overlap between our Citizens Utility Advisory Board and our Budget Committee. In addition, in code, it says that CUAB will be promoting public knowledge and understanding of the city's utility programs and other activities as council may assign. So these are the key things that are in code and how the city has then implemented that direction that's in code with our CUAB. In addition, the other key piece in code is what makes up the membership. And the membership is one of three areas. You need to be a resident, You need to be a business owner within Milwaukie or a utility customer that is served by us but may not be within the city limits. In the case of our budget committee, every resident member of our budget committee lives within the city of Milwaukie. So again, they meet that first qualification in terms of membership within the CUAB. So we've provided a outline of with the training and work plan and really orientation, because what we'd be doing is we'd be taking a number of people who have not been very closely tied to the Citizens Utility Advisory Board, needing to train them, bring them up to speed. And so what you can see in December through February are monthly meetings where we'll be orienting the members, the proposed members of the CUAB, and all of the factors that we were just discussing. So what is our utility services? How are they funded through rates and system development charges? As we get into closer to the budget, there is a budget committee meeting set for February where we will be talking about rate recommendations and the Kellogg funds. So we need to, before that meeting, orient them to that piece as well. So we've gotten those 4 of the 5 key items that'll all be happening very early on in those first several months. And then we'd be moving to essentially quarterly meetings. And when we get later in this year, we'd be talking about the sewers, or excuse me, our storm system plan. So that's where they get into like the 5th area. So that would be how we'd be orienting them, what their work plan, and how we'd be implementing the work of the Citizens Utility Advisory Board. So finally, on November 7th, we're currently scheduled to come to council with appointments to the Citizens Utility Advisory Board. What staff is proposing is that we're recommending council appoint the resident members of the budget committee to be our Citizens Utility Advisory Board. Further, we feel that under municipal code, to do so doesn't require any change to our code. They'd still have the same purpose. They meet the membership qualifications, and so no changes are necessary. With that, I'll take questions, and that finishes my presentation.
All right, Councilor Stavanger, do you want to start?
Just a quick question about perspective. I understand the overlap of resident perspective, but I think the other 2 areas that you mentioned were business owners and then folks that are outside of the city but served by the city. Do you feel like there's enough representation of those viewpoints on the budget committee, or are we missing any perspectives in this change?
We, to the best of my knowledge, and I actually don't have direct knowledge of the work that each member of our budget committee residents do. That said, we would get the resident members. The number of utility customers that we serve that are outside the city is a relatively small number. Probably the place where we're going to be missing the most would be on the business community side. And if Peter was here, he'd be able to tell you how many business community members we've had on the CUAB in the past. Unfortunately, I don't have that information. I could get that to you by before November 7th, if that's helpful.
But it's very low.
Okay.
So it has not been a strong point for that committee of
No, I was
membership.
going to say, I started on that committee. That was
Okay.
my first city committee, and I can't think of a business person that's, I mean, I can't think of one.
I don't think it's different.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Khosrowbadi, did you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Council President?
So will this be a burden to the budget committee already, or are they willing to take this on?
Thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it would absolutely be additional work for the budget committee members. We did have a discussion at the last budget committee meeting about this. The resident members that were there expressed a willingness to try and take this on. And I think it will be something that will need to be reviewed at a certain amount after a couple of years.
Councilor Massey, any questions? Not seeing a raised hand.
Yeah, no questions.
Okay. Just following up, so they haven't I mean, I remember the discussion at the Budget Committee meeting, but you haven't shared this proposed meeting schedule for the first, from December onward with them to see if it sends them into shock?
We have not. I actually have a meeting, sort of an informal meeting, with 3 of our resident members on Friday, and I would be wanting to give them an update. I'll update all the resident members, but I'd in person be able to update them on the results of tonight's discussion.
Okay, great. I mean, yeah, I like your schedule, and I think some of the counselors might, I'm hoping those might be taped, so that counselors who don't feel like they maybe have the full understanding of the rates, of how that works, can benefit from them too. So, yeah.
They're not typically, and CUAB isn't currently, but it is also, as we've said before on our other committees, open to the public. So we can make sure that you all receive, especially for the first year, what the content of those meetings are going to be, just so that you can make a choice if you want to come listen in. A lot of the conversations about the SDCs and other pieces will, of course, come before you, so you will also get that. But the training in particular might be interesting.
Real quick on the membership. So is this 5 additional members outside the budget committee? This is within the budget committee, people that are already on the budget committee.
So the Budget Committee, thank you, Councilor. The Budget Committee is comprised of our 5 elected officials and an equal number of residents of the city. And so we would be asking the resident members of the Budget Committee to be appointed to and operate also as the Citizens Utility Advisory Board.
So you wouldn't need to amend anything in the code that says appointed at large by the mayor, that there was no conflict in that?
We wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
If council wants to clarify within code that the membership or how we have implemented the purpose and the tasks that the CUAB undertakes, that's absolutely something we could do if directed. And however, it's not necessary.
Thank you.
And I guess if you're thinking that, we're going to try it for a couple of years and see how it works, it may make sense not to mess with the code until we see how it works. I will say that, I guess CUAB membership has been down, which is why, we did have 1 or 2 applicants this year, but, which is why, we're kind of facing this decision. I do think, in my experience, it certainly didn't always have 5 members. It was often a 4-member committee. So I guess there has been trouble keeping it at full complement over the years, so. Other questions, comments? Sounds like everybody's okay with this idea? Yep, okay.
To move forward with the staff recommendation for November 7th?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm seeing a head nod.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I do think this is aside from what Toby LaFrance had just presented to us, but the fact that membership has been down in some of these boards and commissions, which is why one of them is potentially going away and the other one is being absorbed. We may want to look at what's going on or what we might be doing, our process, because this hasn't been an issue. I know membership has been an issue, but just like the mayor had said, 4, as opposed to in our budget committee meeting, we had 1 person left standing. So I think we need to take a review at our processes and see where's the disconnect and why is the public not feeling like they want to engage with the city?
I think it's a really great question. And I can't answer this entirely, but I can give you a couple of guesses. Number 1, people like to work on things that the leadership want them to work on, right? They like to have a calling. They like to know that they're going to be heard by this body in particular when they make recommendations. It's why task forces have been really successful here. The comp plan committee went really well. The CPAC went really well. Committees where there's a focused amount of time and energy. TSP, I almost guarantee, is going to have consistently great turnout for the type of work that you're all asking them to do. Same thing, honestly, with the Equity Steering Committee. It's a goal of the councils. People know that you're hearing them. They're going to show up and they're going to make it a priority to be there because it's something they know that's important to you. PSEC was having a similar issue years ago. They started to dwindle, and that's when I believe Mayor Beatty and at the time Mayor Gamba and others and Councillor Faulkner sort of reinvigorated that group by giving it a new calling that was important to that standing council, and that was the SAFE program. So I think there's a lot of ways we can work passionate projects into these groups where there's a lot of nuts and bolts where they really feel valued in that work. And I do think it takes work. It's why when we talk about committees taking 10% of a staff person's time to do them right, that's why I say that, is because I want us to do them right, and I want us to make sure that that's valuable, not wasted time. So we're working on that, right? Budget committee makes real hard decisions during a budget process. That's why they come to all of our meetings, is we have really nutty conversations about what's happening at the city, where we're going, decisions around staffing and money. We're hoping that transfers into the same level of commitment around the things that lead to that document, because I think it's really important. So, yes. Short answer is I agree with you, and I want to make sure that anytime we have a committee meeting, it's successful and it's filled with engagement, true engagement for the people who have given up their time and energy to come to the meeting.
Well, and just to be clear, your premise there wasn't really correct. The CUAB has been understaffed. The DLC has been fully staffed. I don't know that the DLC has been short-staffed. It's been fully staffed. It's generally had applicants. And I do think we probably have a conversation to have later this year before we start the recruitment for next year's boards and committees. Because one of the things that happened this year, the last 2 years, is that we don't ask people early in the process before we start advertising openings. We don't ask the people on the committee if they're going to re-up or not. And so we get all these applicants for the library board, and we end up having 0 openings on the library board because everybody on the library board is re-upping. So I think we need to calibrate that a little better before we start the application process, the sort of announcement and outreach process, but also all of us can be better ambassadors for that, right? Once
Yeah.
that process opens about promoting that and asking people to apply. As a general rule, I would say in the last 5 years, we have not had a shortfall of applicants. We've had enough applicants other than this one CUAB.
We've had a few where specialized people are harder, right? So the more nuanced the role, the harder sometimes it is to get into the board. So if it requires an architect, it's harder to find somebody who's an architect who also meets the other criteria. The only other thing I would say, and I think you're right, Mayor, we've got to figure out how to do this differently. On the committee that I was engaged with, we actually did send out a notice. We said, please let us know before we post these. And then I ended up getting emails from people saying, oh, well, I want to be on the day of interviews. So we did ask them to give us feedback. They didn't internalize that meant, no, really, I think Scott sent a couple of emails saying, no, really, I need to know this. And people just get busy and they miss it. So yes, we need to be better. We probably need in-person conversations around those things.
Well,
and
as
we
you
need
say,
people
I
to
would think the
commit in
staff
person.
liaison, that shouldn't all fall to Scott. The
Not
staff
at all.
liaison should be doing that, yeah.
Well, in one of the cases, it was a health issue. So somebody wasn't sure they could make the commitment knowing what was going on. And then by the time they told us, they were able to, but it impacted the appointments.
And this very conversation is why we moved in part to the annual recruitment process. We used to do it ad hoc, and there were reasons why we moved away from that, but one of them is to be more strategic in recruiting. And we can absolutely do it better. We've only done it twice in the annual process, and that's a good note, Mayor Beatty. I'll plan to come back early in 24 with that plan. I'll also observe the pandemic really made people realize where they spend their time. And I think there's been a negative impact on people's willingness to volunteer. I agree also with the observation, Mayor, that we have continued to have solid numbers when people apply. Certainly the library board is by and far the most popular one for people to apply for, even if I think we had I think people will apply for that no matter what. But All of it's true, and all of it's what we're muddling through, and we can do it better, and we'll continue to work that way. But the pandemic, I think the pandemic certainly impacted where students spend their time, because we have had absolutely no success with getting high school students to apply, or middle school, any students to apply.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, I think Toby has what he needs, yeah?
I do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you. We have Jason Wax, and I assume Stephen Flashbrook to come talk to us about the Leadership Academy.
You were ready with stuff.
It is. Yes, and we did have a number of applicants this year from the Leadership Academy. In fact, so many that we weren't able to place them all.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jason Wax, Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Milwaukee. I'm here with my colleague.
Stefan Lashbrook.
We're here tonight to talk about the Milwaukee Leadership Academy. We basically just wrapped up in 2023, the fourth year of it. Stefan's been involved in the Leadership Academy since the beginning of it. This past year was the first time that I helped coordinate it as a staff liaison. We're just going to go through and give you a little background. I'm not sure how much you all know about the academy and what we've been trying to accomplish, its purpose. We'll tell you a little bit about the 2023 class and what that looked like. I will tell you we were back in person for the first time in a while, and that was great. Recruitment of class participants, how we try to find folks. We did a little final evaluation with them this year, and we have a little glimpse of kind of the folks who participated and who we might be missing, and we'll talk a little bit about the future of the program. And I'm going to let Stefan chime in anytime he'd like. He's kind of my color commentator, I think.
That's
in
it.
some ways. So yeah, this was the fourth year of the program in 2023. Really the biggest goal is we invite folks in from the city to learn how the city works directly from staff. It's an opportunity to become, for folks to become more engaged and more effective community members if they know what we do and how to plug themselves into what we do. This does really, the last conversation really led into one of the big goals of the academy is to get folks involved in our leadership positions, whether that's a board, a committee, or our NDAs, or eventually city council, and other volunteer type of events and things that we do. So the 2023 class, we did 6 sessions. Previous classes did 7, but we changed it up a little bit this year. So we did the history and form of government to kick it off. We did finance and engineering. We had a whole session on communication, engagement, and boards and committees, strategically placed so that folks who are interested in applying before the deadline in the spring could do so. So that gave them an opportunity to learn a lot about what it is that they can plug themselves into. Public safety, we did a little tour of the police and fire department, which is always a hit. We did community development and planning, and then public works and climate action. And each year we just try to figure out, what are some topics that folks want to do. We kind of mix it up each year. These are fairly standard ones, though, in terms of finance and engineering. There's certain ones that we know that people need to learn about, and then we try to sort of add on from there. If we don't talk about the money, then, for example, then, there'd be some confusion on how we do what we do. The class, as I mentioned, has been co-facilitated by Stefan Lashbrook here. And then we basically have had just, staff come in, work with them in advance to kind of do their presentations. And then most of them this past year were held in this room, but we moved around the city as well, as much as we could. This year we did all except one was in person. The first one, got about half the class was sick, and I think I was sick. There was a problem, so we did that one online, but the rest of them were all in person. The class size was limited to 25 students, mostly because most of our spaces don't fit more than that. In fact, we struggle with 25 a little bit. As you can imagine, 25 people in here starts to get a little crowded. We did have 4 class participants this last year apply for a board or committee, and I think potentially some more of them may in this next recruitment cycle as well. So we did a variety of things that we normally do to try to find folks, the pilot newsletter, social media, the city website. We put some information in the Clackamas Community Colleges. They have this sort of community education online database. We did a digital flyer for North Clackamas schools through Peach Jars, like the process that they use. And then we reached out to the North Clackamas Chamber of Commerce as well to try to get some folks. And then there were other things as well, but those are the primary ones. And we're always kind of looking for other ways. I really honestly think word of mouth is probably, of folks who took the class prior, it seems like that's, heard from a lot of folks who heard about it through friends or colleagues. So the final evaluation, my computer here is doing something weird, but was I sent out an evaluation to 23. So out of the 25 people who started, 23 folks completely finished. We lost a few people in the beginning who, for a couple different reasons. But overall, the overwhelming of the 8 people who did fill the survey out felt that it met their expectations. Their knowledge of city services increased. They would recommend the program to someone else or a friend. You can see some quotes there actually received. One of my favorites was, "This was one of the very best classes I've taken in my adult life. I can't believe it was free. The information imparted was fascinating, and I've already recommended this program to a few people." Yeah, people seemed very receptive. I'm not able to move on, Scott.
The arrows on the keypad.
It has a...
Should I tell a joke or something?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah, I really am the color commentator.
Thank you. Okay.
That was easy.
The computer was a little bit upset. So who participated? So one of the big things that we try every year to do, and we're going to keep trying to do, is diversify the class. So we're making a little bit of progress in that area. And of course, like I said, 8 of the 23 responded. So I don't have a full, comprehensive look at it. But we did have a little bit of racial diversity, a little bit of gender diversity. Household income trended high, but we also had folks, we had several college students I know that took the class. No high school, that young, but definitely folks in college. So that was good. Languages most at home was English, and definitely folks from all around the city. We definitely had people from outside the city as well and unincorporated, because we don't limit folks by where they live necessarily. We definitely are happy to accommodate folks who live outside the city as well. And then the last slide I have really is the future of MLA. We plan to do it again in 2024. I can't tell you exactly when, or I believe Stefan's going to work with us again. I just put him on the spot, I think. And the other thing I did want to share is that we're looking at having an internal cohort, a staff cohort, kind of follow it so that a couple different goals. Allow the staff who are going to provide the presentation to the Leadership Academy kind of a chance to practice. But also, if we have a staff cohort, those folks can start to break down some silos and kind of learn from each other as well, since we're already doing this. We have had staff go through the Milwaukie Leadership Academy in the past, and we've heard positive things about that. So it was a way for us to kind of create some cross-departmental cooperation and working together.
And it's going to be called?
Do you want to tell them? Oh, okay. The Millie Scouts. So
Yeah, it's amazing.
Staff might be able to, accumulate badges, who knows? We haven't really worked out all the details yet. But that's all I had. I think it's been a great program. Thanks Mayor Beatty for coming to a couple of the sessions this year. I will say, at least this past year, we always had, dinner provided to everybody before the class. So if you ever want to come and just mingle, we usually about a half an hour before the classes start, invite, council to come and meet the folks and chat with them if you'd like, for sure.
I do just want to call out a couple of things real fast before we start questions. Stefan has done this now for 3 years, 4? 3?
Well, 4.
4. This is a dream that Stefan and I had when he was my 14-second assistant city manager. He and I both worked for organizations that were led by a really incredible woman by the name of Arlene. And I actually never worked for Arlene, just the organization afterwards, but she became the city manager of Wilsonville. So we both came from cities that had a program similar to this. It felt important to us, and I just really appreciating his leadership in making it happen. So thank you for volunteering your time and for caring.
Thank you. I'd be disappointed if I weren't asked to come back.
Please come back.
Yeah.
So,
So I do have a few things I'd like to add before we get to questions. But first, back to yes, this is an opportunity for people to set the stage for a change in their future and what they want to get involved in. There's a state senator from Wilsonville who went through that program in Wilsonville. So obviously it's, that these things do train people in ways that maybe they're even surprised to find that they can do some things. And I think that's important. I do think we can and will in the year ahead do a better job of earlier on emphasizing the opportunities for board and commission appointments. Because one of the things that I heard this year was a lot of people, I think it's because they were feeling more comfortable with city business as it went on. And soon after the deadline to apply, people in the class started saying, oh, I think I'd like to be on this. Oh, I think I'd like to be on this. And we found ourselves telling them, well, now you'll have to wait till next year, but please don't forget. And I think we could probably move some of that forward. And I could certainly help make that happen, I believe. I think there's some things that I know I can do better and intend to. When the classes are actually in session, I really do play the color commentator role, and I tell stories. It's about, you've got a public works director makes a presentation, and there's all kinds of questions for him, but it triggers, oh, I remember the time in another city when the sewer line backed up into all the basements for a block, Anyway, and this is how that played out. Or, that's a pretty bad example, but I have 45 years of those kind of memories, of which I remember some of them. And some of them are entertaining, some of them are gruesome, but they do kind of get people's attention. I guess the last thing, the one disappointment I've had in 4 years of doing this here, and then I think when I was doing it in Wilsonville too, has been the lack of a response to the pitch that I make over and over again. Maybe I'm just not a good pitch man, but about the fact that everybody in the room, if they work here or live here, and especially if they own a home or a business here, that they're shareholders, and this is a corporation. It's a municipal corporation, and we're not here to make a profit, but still, it's a corporation worth billions of dollars. And as they hear, oh, what's it cost to build a mile of streets with sewer lines and water lines and storm systems and all of that, they begin to realize, oh, how much that costs. But I'm not sure that they really internalize that they own it, and that their participation, it makes perfect sense because they do own it. And anyway, I'm going to keep beating that drum, and maybe I just need to find a better way to spin it to make that point.
I think he does a pretty good job, so.
Well, thank you both. Questions? Did anyone have questions? Or?
I have one. We wanted to say that about a year and a half ago, I had COVID and found myself in bed, and I'm not exactly sure what it says about me that I binge watched the entire online collection of the Leadership Academy, but it was really, really well done, and the conversations were amazing, and the staff who presented the information, I think it was just really engaging. So I wanted to let you know that. And then I'm really curious about, I think, Jason, you had mentioned that there weren't any high school applications. Has there ever been a young person who has gone through the program? And I guess, what advice would you have for youth who might be interested in going through that?
don't know if we, have we had, do you
Yeah,
know?
we have.
Yeah.
So,
Have
so,
had?
so
First
but,
year.
but before Jason was involved, we had actually, the years run together in my mind, but either the first or second year, we had 2 high school students and 1 middle school student. The middle school student didn't stick with it. The high school students got pretty iffy by the end of the term, but I think they gained from it at least. I kept trying to structure a way that especially those students might get some extra credit in school. There ought to be a report they could do and turn in and get some credit for that. Anyway, I'm not sure I ever got any traction with that either.
And we had conversations at that point. We talked to Waldorf and we talked to the high school to see if there were ways we could make that work. Stefan was committed to being an advisor in that case and actually helping make sure that the students were getting content. It just didn't traction the number of times we tried. So it's worth talking, especially to the Waldorf school where they have a civics class very similar to this around 11th and 12th grade where it might actually make some sense for them to get credit. And we're always happy to talk to Kim, but it just never quite took.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I'm just curious, I didn't say, maybe you said it and I didn't hear, but looking back at the past 4 years, do you see an increase in participation year over year? Does it stay the same? Is it up and down? What have you been seeing, both of you, so far since this inception of this?
Overall participation? I think it's pretty steady. I was very impressed that almost everybody in the class showed up for the last class. That tells you a lot, because often people are worn out. They've moved on to other things. But in our case, that was late spring by that point, and people definitely had their minds on other things because the weather was nice outside, and it said a lot that they kept showing up. Now, the pandemic certainly had an effect on this, as in everything else. And it was difficult to judge levels of interest from people out there in computer land, If they stayed tuned in and posed questions and were involved, that was the best we could do. But other than that, we couldn't really tell, couldn't gauge. But having been a college instructor myself before, I can tell you, having so many students show up the last day of class tells you a lot.
Yeah.
We'll also say the cohorts were different. So each year we've done this, we've had a different group of individuals who have shown up. And I think the last year, remind me if I'm correct on this, it was a lot of real estate agents who actually just wanted to understand what was happening in Milwaukie better. It seemed like there were 4 or 5 friends who all thought it would be a good program. And it was great. They asked wonderful questions, at least to me when I was on the call. So the first year, maybe it was the second year, must have been the second year, right after George Floyd's murder, we definitely had people who are ready to engage from a different place of wanting to make change. So each year it kind of shifts, but I've been really excited. We thought maybe we'd see a drop off this year in the number of people because we're starting to get through 120 people who have participated. And I don't think you did. I think you filled every slot at the beginning. Is that right?
Yeah, we filled up in like a month and a half and had actually some people on the waiting list. And we were able to pull from a few folks who kind of dropped in the beginning and then started. So yeah, I was a little worried about filling the class, but it was not a problem. I did hear from someone in, I think, Kirkland, Washington, who runs a similar program. And he contacted a whole bunch of different cities. And so I have a whole bunch of information about how different cities do these types of things. And it's all over the place. So some people have, charged for it, like it's like kind of built in, and they you have to pay a fee, almost like pay tuition. Some do it every month, some don't. It's just there's so many different ways to do it. So we can always try different things for sure. But I foresee the class filling up again. We've talked about if we start to see a drop off, we could potentially maybe do it every other year or something like that if we had to, but we haven't had to.
So you have a wait list of people that will want to be notified?
Yeah, there's probably 3 or 4 people from last year that would definitely notify once we have a schedule. Yeah.
A couple more things I wanted to add. One, only one of the 8 people who responded to the questionnaire at the end was from outside the city, but in fact, at least 3 or 4 of the people live outside the city. I know a couple of them. The other point I wanted to make, and it's sort of a thank you to Mayor Beatty in this, because for each of the 4 years, you have shown up when we've asked you to. You've shown up to have dinner before the meetings. I thought one of the best ones we've done overall was the when you and Councilor Heisey were both running for mayor, and that was a really engaging class, and I thought you both handled it really well, and that was a good one. So the point I'm getting to is I would really want to encourage city councilors to participate, you don't have to stay for the whole session. You can come for the half hour beforehand and have dinner with the group, and they will have some questions for you, but it's, I think it lends a note of, gravitas is probably too serious a word, but it's a statement of the city's commitment to this program. And anyway.
And the first year you did kind of schedule all the counselors, or somebody did, and told us different months that you wanted us to come,
Yeah.
so that we didn't have any
And-
quorum problems or anything. And that would be probably good to do again this time, is just kind of,
Well, and then we hit COVID.
yeah.
So
then we
that
had
was like,
COVID and they
That's
weren't-
exactly what
Yeah.
happened,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, we can have a discussion about that for next year.
Councilor
That'd be
Massey's
awesome.
hand is raised. Sorry.
Counselor Massey. Well, actually, let me go to Council President Nicodemus first. No questions. Okay, Counselor Massey.
Well, thanks. I think this is a great program. Kind of beyond the, the formal structure of the program, do you have any thoughts about, the value of the networking they just do with their other cohorts in the class? I have always found that valuable in programs that, you have like-minded people who want to do good things for the city, and they, do you feel like that they sort of build something long-lasting among themselves?
I definitely think so. I mean, I think you just kind of hear folks talking to each other and meeting each other. I don't have I couldn't put numbers to it, but definitely you can kind of feel when people show up, they have, met each other. Maybe they're going and meeting each other, or, yeah, there was definitely networking going on. It's very I don't know, that it just happens mostly when we're having pizza. And I think that's getting back to the in-person was super important for that, for sure. That half hour before the class is more valuable, I think, maybe than the class itself, and for networking, for sure.
Yeah, I saw people exchanging business cards and contact info, that kind of thing. But yeah, as Jason said, we don't know where that information went from there, but clearly some of that was happening, and there were some new contacts being made.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be surprised if there's not some networking value going on. Yeah, it's good to hear.
We always did an icebreaker in the beginning, and I think sometimes people learned a lot about each other through that, and then those connections could be made just through the fun icebreaker too. So.
Yeah, and kind of a thank you to Wilda. She suggested when we first started this that the sessions always end with everyone having the opportunity to say what was their aha moment in the evening. And there were some really good ones about, I had no idea that this happened in the city, or I had no idea,
Good,
So,
thanks.
yeah.
Cool. Well, if there's no other questions, we'll look forward to knowing when you're recruiting for the next one and helping recruit for that, and,
All right,
yeah.
Sure.
And
Thank you.
participating.
Thank you.
thanks, Jason.
All right, with that, our work session is adjourned, and we will reconvene in 20 minutes for the regular session.
And there are no tables to eat at, just so we're all clear. So you may generally want to be here. My